Good evening and welcome. I am to this meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee on Monday, the 13th of March, 2023. I'm Councillor Paul Smith. I'm a councillor for St Anne's and St John's Ward, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. The usual housekeeping arrangements, the actions in the event of emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Ronald Street. This meeting is being held in the grand jury room of the town hall in Colchester and is also being broadcast live over the internet, where it can be watched via the council's YouTube channel, where the recording is available to view afterwards. Please would speakers use the microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphones. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly and set them to silent and do not use the voice or camera flash functions. There are toilets on every floor of this building and an induction loop in this room. We will have a short break at 7:30, subject to the progress of the meeting. Introductions. I will now ask that the members of the committees and turning officers to introduce themselves, starting to my left.
Good evening, Andrew Weavers, Monitoring Officer.
Hello everyone, Chris Pearson, Labour Councillor for Beer Church and Vice Chair of the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening all. Councillor Dave Harris from Beer Church, and welcome to the visitors at home.
My apologies. Hayley McGrath, Corporate Governance Manager.
Councillor Reese Smithson, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Barbara Wood, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor William Sykes, Rural North Ward. Councillor Sam McCarthy, representing Shrub End Ward.
Matthew Evans, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much. Substitutions. I believe Councillor Sunnox is substituting for Councillor Naylor this evening. Urgent items. I believe there are none. Thank you. Item 4, declarations of interest. We'll take them as they arise. Item 5, have your say on the general portion of the agenda, and there are no speakers under that one. There are, however, 4 speakers under the item 6, which are Alderman Aboba, Alderman Bob Russell, Alderman Sonia Lewis, and Alderman Teresa Higgins. I believe that is everyone. And we also have joining us remotely some of our internal auditors who are equally welcome. I move on to item 6 on the agenda. Mr. Weavers.
Thank you, Chairman. This report contains a report on suggested changes to the eligibility criteria for honorary aldermen. I have nothing further to add to what is in the report, Chairman, except to point out that there is a typo in paragraph 4.4 on the 3rd line. It reads, the proposal was full discussed by those present, and of course it should have said that the proposal was fully discussed by those present. So apologies for my typo, but as set out in the report, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Alderman Boba, would you care to address us? As with all speakers.
Where do I stand?
Yeah, right. Thank you, Alderman. You will have 3 minutes. The bell will sound after 2.
Okay, I'm talking about the changes to the aldermanic procedure. Most of the proposals that before you came as about bolt out of the blue to us as aldermen, because we had spent 3 meetings going through the aldermanic criteria ourselves, which we were told had been signed off by the portfolio holder, and that was a lengthy process. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, we get all of this. And what we have apparently is a tried and tested criteria that works. So I'm working on the basis of if it ain't broke, why break it? So the leader of the council is a political appointment by any ruling group. The appointment of aldermen is linked to civic endeavour and linked to service, not political affiliation. So we're opposed to that. Then there is the proposal to award aldermanic title posthumously. Well, that's quite breathtaking. The Pope creates saints and martyrs, and the military can award a Victoria Cross. I do not view councillors as saints or martyrs, and service on the council is a civic duty and not a military service. They don't even appoint departed people to the House of Lords. Well, not yet, anyway. So where does that change? Length of service is the common denominator. Once that criteria is set, it includes potentially all who meet it, and it excludes those who don't. That's always going to happen. You're going to have people under a criteria who meet the criteria and others don't. We support the criteria because it establishes exceptional service and creates a uniqueness, which is unique to Colchester. Any change that's currently in front of you, in our view, undermines that status. I conclude that the proposals are simply to unruffle the feathers of people who currently don't qualify. It's rather like people who take a driving test and don't pass, and then moan that the criteria of the driving test is too severe, and then tries to lobby that the criteria of a driving test is lowered. Well, I don't buy into that either. That's what I've done. Did I manage to do that in 3 minutes? I'd like to know.
You most certainly did. You've got about 15 seconds left, but
I got it right.
well, congratulations. I only wish all councillors could make their points as briefly and concisely as you've done.
But may I say, when I was a councillor, I never did make it as brief as that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening. I should have said, if any of your members of your committee ever want to come along to the Aldermanic and listen to us, rather than me getting a bus stop, then please do so. It may be a way of having a dialogue that we currently haven't got. That was injury time.
Thank you very much, Alderman. The next one is Alderman Sir Bob Russell.
Thank you, Chairman. Alderman Bober is the chair of the Honorary Alderman's group, and he has been an Honorary Alderman for 29 years now. I endorse all the points he's made and add a few more. I regret that this item is even on the agenda because clearly the basic homework, the courtesy, the respect of finding out the views of the Honorary Alderman should have been done. Soundings out should have been done. That's the way it should be done. And whoever is driving this agenda has not given the Honorary Alderman that basic courtesy and that basic respect. The Local Government Act of 1972 enabled two councils, as we were then, to appoint Honorary Aldermen in recognition of service. And Colchester Borough Council took the view that it would go to those who served as mayor. With one exception, we started off with the first Honorary Alderman was a chap called Chris Jolly, who reached his 100th birthday. He was mayor, I think, in 1927, 28, something like that. So that was done deliberately. He was on the council for 49 years. And that was done deliberately as a link from the past. But then on, the only Honorary Alderman were those who had served as mayor. Well, we then came to a situation where one long-serving councillor, Rod Green, didn't wish to be mayor, but it was felt that his long service was such that the criteria would be altered. This was all like the British Constitution. None of it was written down. It was just known and accepted. Former mayors, when they left the council, came an Honorary Alderman. Then it was changed to allow councillors with 20 years, exceptional service. So when you're a mayor, it's non-political, long service for your community, irrespective of the political party you're a member of. That was long service recognition. The leader of the council, and I have been the leader of the council, I have been mayor, there's a difference. The leader of the council is a political appointment. The mayor is a civic appointment, and the honours board in the mayor's parlour is purely for long-serving 20 plus. And I appreciate, Chairman, that you and Councillor Harris are at the cusp, if not already there, of long service. Whether you will ever be mayors, that's your choice. You'd have had that choice, and you may yet have the choice. But you're there by dint of fact. I hope that the committee will say, good idea, but we're not going to do it. But I think we need to know where this is coming from, because we are told that the four group leaders had agreed. I can't speak for anybody in all the other groups, but I did check with Councillor Gocher, and he has no recollection of it. I also, over the weekends, discussed it with a member of the Liberal Democrats, and that person had no knowledge of this either. So I hope this will be rejected. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next contribution from Alderman Sonia Lewis. Again, you have 3 minutes.
I'm not last because I'm a lady. I'm last because we did the protocol of aldermen and Graham and then Bob and myself in years of service. I don't know if you are aware, councillors sitting around this table, of the implications of this. And I ask you all, please, to indicate if you have discussed the matter within your groups. I'm wasting my time, but I think it's proved a point. My group leader has not agreed to this. I have an email from him stating the Conservative group will discuss it on the 20th, which is next Monday. We were told as aldermen that the group leaders were supportive. I have read the Local Government Act 1972, and it states there that when this goes, if it goes to full council, it has to be on a majority of 2/3 votes, not a one majority. And the honorary title does not confer any powers to make any decisions. I actually feel 20 years is just a bit too long. I can't see many of the councillors today doing the 4 terms of office, 5 terms of office for the 20. So there. At the Alderman meeting, we had no information from previous agendas. It had never been discussed by us. The meeting was well attended, simply because when we read the agenda, we thought, crikey, we've got to be there. And the Alderman there, 11, 10 of us cross-party voted against the proposals and only 1 supported it. I'd just like to make a point about this doesn't include the mayor. The mayor comes under a different category. It's decided by the political groups in advance, and it used to be called horse trading. Nowadays, it's whoever in the political group has put their name forward to be considered, it's the one that served the longest. That's how the mayoral is. I just think that it's very sad that nobody around this table has had a conversation with their political groups. I think that just sums up what I want to say. Oh yes, and I would like to know, through you, Mr. Chairman, who proposed this to the Alderman meeting when, in my opinion, the homework had not been done.
Thank you very much, Alderman. You were as well.
I think I just took keywords.
The next contribution is from Alderman Teresa Higgins. Again, you have the same 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for listening to me. If
members of the committee didn't answer the question from Alderman Lewis, then it's their right to not to respond to those questions. I'm here to speak because I was the lone voice at that particular alderman's meeting. And the reason why I'm here in front of you is that as an alderman, I am very grateful for all the things that all the people have voted me into power and voted me as a councillor and voted me as mayor. And I'm very grateful. But I also do a declaration of interest. I am also an alderman of county council. And the reason why I'm an alderman of county council is they changed their rules. They changed the rules so that after 16 years, you become an alderman. And I served 4 full terms on county council, 4 full terms as an opposition member, which some of you will realise is actually quite difficult to do. I'm very grateful that, thank you very much, they offered me the title of alderman. So I'm also an alderman of the county council. So I'm Alderman Higgins. It's a very interesting title. So the reason why I think it was brought here in front of you is that I think there are some members of this present council and the present members who feel that 20 years is far too long. And nobody wants to survive 5 years or 5 terms as being elected as a councillor. And some of them can cope with 4 years. And I know there are some present members of the council who, if they retire after 16, 17, 18 years, would relish being an alderman, because actually it's a lovely title. It's a very honourable title. And I thank my fellow aldermen for speaking to say how honourable that title is, because we have represented this council on many occasions. We have been elected for several times, and we have been mayor, and some of us have not been mayor. And it is, as I'll tell you in front of you, a very honourable title to be. However, I don't think in the future we'll find many people that will do 5 terms or 20 years. And so therefore, I think to bring it down to 16 years, as county council has done, is actually quite a good reason to do. On the other criteria in front of you, I personally am not again on giving the 2 people who died in office the posthumous office. I do think I am against, though, giving it to former leaders of the council, because at the present rate, one former leader of the council who's only been there for 4 years would get the honorary title of alderman, and I do think that's not quite fair. But however, going back to being councillors and being there for 20 years or maybe 16 years, actually 16 years, I think to my mind is a fair deal. So thank you very much for listening to me, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Alderman Higgins. And can I thank all the contributors for putting forward their views this evening in a very coherent and lucid manner. And I think it reflects well on how highly this honour is prized by the recipients, that they should take the trouble to come and speak to us this evening on this matter. To clear up the question, the reason this item is on the agenda is it is something that I requested that we look at when I took over the chairman of this panel, because I was conscious that the rules had not been looked at for a considerable period of time. And one of the things that struck me was that since the rules had been at 20 years, we had significantly reduced the number of councillors. We'd gone from a council of 60 down to 51, a 15% reduction. And I thought that was something which we needed to consider in the light of the qualifications for aldermen. Because, as has quite rightly been said, it's been an honour that we've looked at over the time. We've changed the rules over the time, and it's quite right that we do continue to review the rules for honorary aldermen to ensure that they are relevant and meet the needs of the council. So my feeling was that given that we had reduced the number of councillors, it's much more difficult to serve the terms. And the interesting thing about serving 5 terms, I faced 7 elections to get to 19 years. So with boundary changes and other things, it often requires a lot more. So my personal view is that we should be looking at reducing the length of service commensurate with a reduction in the number of councillors, just to maintain the balance. Otherwise, we would find that very, very few people would qualify for being aldermen, and the institution would wither on the vine. And that is not something that I welcome. Regarding the other issue that was raised about the leader of the council, Again, we have changed the rules in the past. Originally, it was only the mayor, as we were quite rightly instructed. It got changed because there were councillors at that time who had done considerable service and for whatever reason did not wish to become mayor. Since we've had the change to the cabinet system, we've had the role of the leader of the council as an elected role, and it's been one which has been, in my experience, a very demanding one, and that some councillors have chosen to go down that route rather than the mayoral route. Should we reflect that route of service as well? And I open that up for discussion. Councillor Pearson, to start with.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to respond to Alderman Sonia Lewis and say that the Labour group did in fact have a brief discussion about this item at its last group meeting, but didn't come to a collective view. And I think that's where I am this evening. I share some of the, I suppose, I won't say concerns, but comments that have been made about posthumous appointments and appointments of the leader of the group, leader of the council rather. So I think I would find it difficult to support those two suggestions, but given some of the points that you've already made this evening, Chair, about length of service, the amount of elections that people have had to go through because of changes, and we know that there could be another one afoot. And being aware that there are nearby authorities that have reduced the criteria to 16 years, I wouldn't be opposed to that. I also think that given that we have the item on the agenda this evening, it would be remiss of this committee to keep that decision to itself and not to pass it on to full council.
Thank you. Yes, I would point out that the recommendation is only that we can refer it to full council. It's not something that we can decide on our own. So our decision is whether we wish to pass anything to full council, which will then be voted on under the rules as stated. Councillor Harris.
Yes, Chair. And I'd want to start by thanking all the honorary aldermen for coming along and reporting so consistently, so concisely within the 3 minutes and giving their opinion, and that's welcomed. Yes, we did discuss it at our Labour group, but only when Graham Bover had already had a word with me and already tipped me off this was coming up, because until then we knew nothing. So that's a fact. Now, how do I stand on this? Well, for me, the honourable alderman under the Act of Parliament 72 Act is there because we did confer these by full council onto certain individuals who meet the criteria, the 20-year or being mayor. I'm with others that's spoken already that I don't feel that it should be a political appointment. There shouldn't be given to people that have been leader of the council, because you could only be a leader of the council for a year. And on these proposals, it would quote, and I think that's wrong. So I dismiss that. The other thing that I found really strange is that it came as a bolt of the blue. I think I'm taking the exact words that were said there from one of the speakers that knew nothing about this coming forward until it was discussed at their meeting. And I think, if anything, we should learn from experienced ex-councillors who are now aldermen is listening. And I think what we should do is listen to the aldermen. They have actually said 10 to 1, they don't support these proposals. So therefore, I find it very difficult, Mr. Chairman, to support these proposals, because under that, it seems that there's been a dialogue missing, that there should have been some sort of debate along the way. I certainly like to take, and I say it here and now, I've never been invited to an alderman's meeting before, and I'd love to go. So if I'm invited, I would certainly take up the offer that was offered from one of the speakers, that I could come along to an alderman meeting, at least for a cup of tea or something. For me, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, was also said. So I'm not supporting that idea at all. Now, bearing in mind, I can think of at least 2, maybe 3 councillors that have done close to 30 years, as I recollect. Councillor Hogg, I think, has done immense amount. Councillor Young is another. Now, for me, that is meritorious. Meritocracy is where I think I stand on this, and 20 years I think is a goodly sum. It deserves to be recognised, and somebody could carry on for 30 years and carry on as a councillor, representing their area, representing the people that they live with, representing the neighbourhood that lives in. And for me, I don't want to put this to full council. I'm quite happy for this to die a death as it is. I know that'll upset one of the speakers tonight, but for me, I've got to stand how I feel about this and listen to the 10 on that figure. That's how I stand, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Aldermen for their presentations. As a councillor of some 10 months standing, the thought of 20 years service seems an awfully long way away. However, a couple of things occur to me. The very word alderman derives from ancient Saxon, meaning elder man. They were generally considered to be the elder statesman. And I think we as councillors should listen. I've done some digging and I found the following. East Hertfordshire Council elects or appoints its alderman after only 8 years, 2 terms. Maidstone, 12, Preston, 15, Guildford, 12. There is no consistent theme across councils. It seems to me that 20 years was probably the right thing in 2008, and it seems to me that maybe 16 years is the right thing now. However, I strenuously disagree with the idea of a posthumous award. The very point of being appointed alderman is to provide assistance, to provide support. I'm looking at the list of roles for West Lindsey Council. They are deemed to be advisors, second only to the mayor. They are there to assist the chairman of the council. They are there to help with fundraising, but most importantly, they are there to be an ambassador for the council and to promote pride in the region. I think you can only do that if you have the longevity of service. I don't think it's right to reduce it down to 8 years. You'd have hundreds of aldermen. I think we are probably in the right ballpark with 16. The issue of leader is very difficult for me. We could end up with 20 aldermen in the next 20 years. However, I recognise that the role of leader of the council is a complex and difficult job, and I wonder whether there's a compromise to be reached where perhaps the term could be reduced by 50% for people who have served as leader for a consecutive period of time or a period of time over multiple terms. So perhaps if you've served 4 or 6 years as leader, requirement came down, because I think as leader, you give so much more to the borough, city. This can take a while. You give so much more of your time, your effort as leader. So I think they would be my proposals, Chair.
Thank you. Do any of the other councillors wish to contribute? It seems to me we have 3 parts of the proposal. The first one, the posthumous award. I've not heard anyone speak in favour of that, and so I don't think that's something that we would consider. Regarding reducing the term from 20 years to 16 years, I think there is general consensus around the table, with the exception of Councillor Harris, and I think we should put that proposal to the vote. And we need to also consider the leader issue as a separate one. So I will take the first vote on whether we would vote to reduce the to recommend to full council that the qualifying term be reduced to 16 years. Can I ask those in favour to indicate, please? And those against? 1. So that proposal is carried. Regarding the leader, I think I have some sympathy for what Councillor Smithson has put forward. I don't think that a single year as leader is enough. I personally have done 3 years as leader, so I think doing more than what I've done is probably a very fair standard. So as a compromise, I would go for a proposal that if someone has done 4 years as leader, they should also qualify in terms of simplicity. Is that seconded?
Sorry, Chair. No, I was going to offer a counter proposal, if I may.
So
I would say 4 years with a minimum of 8 years service as a councillor.
that would be perfectly acceptable to me as a proposal. Shall we put that proposal to the vote? All those in favour of that proposal, please show. Sorry. 3. Those against? 3. I have a casting vote. My casting vote will be in favour of that recommendation. And can I thank everyone for the spirit in which this debate has been conducted. This will go forward to full council, where I'm sure there will be further discussions of the matter to the annual meeting of the council. So that will be the new council that will decide on that, right?
The question,
So Harris, yes.
just ask a question, that's full council and that's 2/3 of the majority of the council has to vote for that, is that correct?
That is what Mr. Weavers is indicating, yes. And again, I think just as we voted on the individual recommendations, it would perhaps be right that full council also has the same choice. I see Mr. Weavers is indicated there. Thank you very much, everyone. Councillor Pearson.
Sorry, Chair, it was just that last comment. I'm slightly confused because I thought we had just agreed 2 things would go forward, not 3 to full council. Is that right?
That is absolutely correct, yes,
Okay.
because no one
Yeah.
was in favour of the possible
That's all right.
element, so I see no point in
Yeah, but
taking forward.
the comment that you made suggested that all
Oh,
3.
sorry.
So that's
Right.
why I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Again, thank you very much, everyone. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 9. 7. Sorry, 7. I'm trying to get carried away here. The mid-year audit assurance report. Hayley, I believe that's you to start with.
Thank you, Chair. That's right. I can't believe you were trying to skip over internal audit.
Neither
I
can
know, straight on to item 9. As you said, this is our mid-year report. So it's a report taking us from the 1st of April to the 30th of November. Now, normally this would have been reported to yourselves back in January, but because of various issues with committee meetings for the beginning of this year, it's been put back until obviously March. So it's slightly out of date in terms of current situation and reporting those issues. And you will receive another report in June with the year-end report on. So it won't be that much longer before we'll be able to bring everything up to date for you. So our 2 main audit contacts are with us tonight online. So Fiona and Olu, who provide our internal audit service via TIA, and they are much more knowledgeable about the individual audits themselves than I am. So they're here to answer any questions you may have about those individual audits. But I'm just going to give you a quick summary and an overview of our audit position for those first 6 months of the year. So we've provided an effective internal audit service. We haven't completed half of the audits in that time, and we never do in our internal audit programme, because our programme is more geared towards the year end to provide assurance for our statement of accounts. So a lot of our bigger audits take place later on in the year. So it's never quite a straight split between the two reports that I send to you. 3 out of the 10 audits that have been completed received a substantial assurance rating, which is the highest rating that you can have, which is very good. One of the audits we had carried out doesn't have a rating, and that's because we appreciate that there were some improvements that needed to be made to the system. So rather than coming and doing a normal audit and telling us what we already know in some respects about the system itself, we asked for some support in terms of reviewing what we had and providing some guidance about where we need to take that system going forwards. That's our fraud and corruption audit, and the results of that are highlighted in the report from TIA for you. The items that are highlighted in that audit, the actions, were due to be completed by the end of January. I have to admit, they're my actions. For various reasons, they haven't all been fully completed. We've had some shortage with staff in other areas of my team that's required some resources, and also because of some issues that cropped up recently and some other events that we had to deliver. Some of the work program has been put back slightly, but they will be completed by the end of the financial year. So when you receive your report in June, I'll be able to give you more of an update on those ones. The remaining audits received a reasonable assurance rating, which is good. So there's nothing to be worried about with a reasonable assurance. It means our system is operating as it should do. There is a few improvements that could be carried out, but that doesn't mean there's any problems with the systems at this point in time. And I've set out the types of recommendations that have been made. We've only had one priority one, and that related to our fraud and corruption audit as set out. So we expected that. There is no concern with that going forward. And obviously, as I say, Fiona and Ollie are here to answer any questions. And if there's anything that you'd like to raise, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smithson.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you, Chair. I try and keep this as brief as possible because I appreciate that obviously it's backloaded towards the back end. A couple of observations. Reading through the reports from TIA, some of the things that haven't been done are due to lack of staff, ICT manager leaving and the likes. Obviously that is what it is. There's not a lot we can do about that, but I do wonder whether that presents us with a key man dependency risk that we should be looking at on the risk register. If we can't audit, does that because we don't actually have the person in place to fulfill the role, the function in itself is the first thing. The second thing was on page 35 around the conflict of interest over secondary employments. I think it would be useful to understand how any potential conflicts were assessed, have any been found, and if so, what were the outcomes of those? They were the only 2 questions I had. Thank you.
Hayley.
Yes, of course. So I'll answer the first one about the risk of dependency. There is always a risk of dependency on individuals, especially in highly specialist and technical areas. It's one that does come up on our operational risk registers. It's not one that we necessarily put on our strategic risk register, but it's something that we have as part of our people plan in terms of looking at how we make sure we can spread some of that knowledge and that dependency is reduced. It is something that we are aware of. It has had an impact. I think it's been highlighted quite keenly probably in the last 6 months in terms of there's been a few areas where we've had those vacancies. It may be that going forwards with the recruitment freeze, we will find some of the other roles having an impact on our audits, but that's a risk that we have to highlight to take forward. In terms of the individual audit, I'll let Fiona and Ollie answer that one if that's okay.
Thank you. Fiona, Ollie.
Okay. Good evening. I actually conducted the audit. What we looked at is evidence of approval of secondary employment, because I know that the council allows secondary employment. So we selected a sample of 25 staff to test out of the 82 staff members that have secondary employment. So what the focus of the audit was to ensure that they were approved to carry on with the secondary employment, and that their managers were aware of the timing and it wasn't conflicting on their role. So that's why we didn't raise any recommendation, because all this was found to be in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smithson, does that answer your?
It does, thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sons.
Yes, I'd like to echo the key man point, which is obviously in a year when we've not been able to keep our salaries up with inflation, you can see the risk of key people disappearing with a whole lot of knowledge and us floundering in between. So I'd echo that strongly. I'd also like to point out, I've seen these internal audit things before, and perhaps this is more about the program and what we're doing. The focus seems to be really operational, and it's really good that it is. But are we missing out? It's very process driven. You're looking at processes all the time, and not actually looking for the nuggets of the problem. And I've always in the finance functions I've run, encourage the auditors to actually go for key points and then to work out from that back to the process. So you're looking at actually a sharp problem. It's much more fun, and it's much less boring to read the reports. You sometimes get into more controversy there. You might have to tone it down a little bit, but I'd really love to see it much more sharply focused on real problems that we might have.
Absolutely. And I think there is a balance. Obviously, for our accounts purposes, we need to provide reassurance to the external auditors and various other agencies about the appropriateness of our systems for control. But we do have an element of our audit days that are, if you like, spare, and we can use those on particular issues. So, for example, I've had a councillor who's raised some concerns about particular processes that have taken place within their ward, and we are auditing that particular system. So it's to do with Section 106 monies, and we are actually doing an audit that is very focused on that particular issue. So if there are concerns, we do actually carry out those audits as a separate item. So we have a programme that's set aside with our rolling reviews to make sure that our fundamental systems are correct, but we do build in an element, and I am very keen to build in more of those. And when we get on to the next report, I'll be talking about our internal audit plan for next year and how that might be slightly different to how we've done it normally.
Thank you very much.
So does that mean councillors are encouraged to raise issues with you? That's really useful. Thanks.
Absolutely. That's the whole having our governance team. The councillor has a concern, and the councillor that I'm dealing with at the moment was very concerned with some issues. If they have a concern, you are always able to approach either Andrew or myself to talk about those, and if necessary, we will ask our internal auditors to carry out a review to provide some reassurance and do some fact finding for you.
Thank you very much. Before I bring Councillor Pearson in, I'll also point out, I think the fraud and corruption was another audit which management asked to be done because they had concerns, is that the right word? Which certainly proved to be justified from looking at the audit report, which did find some significant findings there. So
yes, I think
grateful to the auditors for that.
I think in our view, it was, we were aware that we weren't perhaps as robust as we could be with our system, and we just wanted to understand where we were compared to other authorities as well. So it's changing some of that mindset within the organisation about using auditors as a management tool, as opposed to something that is going to provide issues or concerns for them. So if it's getting managers to understand that they're there to be used as a good thing and not to actually berate them because the system's gone wrong. If you feel that there's a problem, then we'll bring the auditors in and we'll have a look at it in a supportive manner.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, and I think just coming back to Hayley's final point, it's absolutely crucial that as an authority, members are confident that our officers are actually doing that. Because that shows that we're not complacent, our officers aren't complacent. And they recognise that we don't always get it right. So, and we do need to be challenged. Members need to challenge officers, and we need to have auditors challenging our officers as well. Just one quick, polite interjection, I would say. In the 21st century, when we have a diversity of employment policy, we ought to be referring to key people rather than key men, I would suggest. That said, I'm just going to come to the point that I wanted to, which is on page 33 around safeguarding, and just slightly concerned that only about 2/3 of all of our staff have undertaken safeguarding level 1 training. Doesn't say what the numbers are for the members of the authority. There are also some other obvious spaces in terms of prevent training. I know that we are not an authority with responsibility, direct responsibility for safeguarding children, but as members, we are on doorsteps, we are on the streets on a regular basis, and we should be able to see and to report where we see that children in particular and vulnerable adults might be at risk and report those appropriately. But I also know that we have members of staff who are regularly out and about, housing officers, our refuse collectors, and all sorts of other members of staff who will see things that really ought to be reported. And having sat for many a year now in my work capacity on boards that look after the safeguarding of children and vulnerable adults, I think it's absolutely crucial that most, if not all of our staff and most, if not all of the members of this authority have completed mandatory training on safeguarding.
Thank you. I think that's something which we need to pick up in the recommendations and ensure that suitable training is provided, particularly for members. But I share your concerns at the relatively low percentage of staff who've had it. I appreciate there will be some roles where it would not be necessary, but as you quite rightly said, there are many more that do. So I thank you for that. Can I also raise a point? Hayley, you did mention that the recommendations, the fraud and prevention ones had not been completed yet, although they were due to have been completed by the end of the month. I think we need to have a record of when they are completed, because I think we'd want to know that they have been completed by the end of March, which I believe is your new deadline.
Absolutely, Chair. In terms of reporting to yourselves, obviously the first meeting of the new municipal year will be in June, and you will actually have the audit update at that meeting as well. So the first meeting of the new year, you'll have a full review of where the fraud and corruption audit is, and obviously I'll be presenting that to you, so you'll be able to grill me yourself on that one.
Thank you. I was thinking though that if you could circulate the group representatives on this panel with an update,
of course,
once they have been completed, because if for whatever reason we get to June and they still haven't been done, I suspect whoever on this panel next year would be saying,
yeah, absolutely,
why is it slipped another 3 months? We understand what's happened at the moment, but I think we need to keep our eye on those. Those are serious recommendations.
Absolutely, Chair. Once they're complete, then I'll do that email round and confirm all the details for you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. I agree with the sentiments that Councillor Pearson gave there on safeguarding. Personally, I'm safeguarded trained by the Essex Girls and Boys Clubs, and I was glad to get that because we run a youth club, and I think there's merit in exactly what Councillor Pearson was saying, where we need to be aware on who to report to. The safeguarding team, Essex County Council, have that responsibility. Two questions on the paperwork. One is really just a comment of probably over the assurance bit where we updated the exit questionnaire on staff that are leaving. Now, I think staff leave for all sorts of reasons, all through their career, and they move from one career to another. But I just wonder whether, and it was good practice that I did when I was managing 150 staff on the railway, that it was to have a interview with certain selected key members of staff, because it was interesting to know why a particular member was leaving. It could be very simple, and it could be things that lessons that we can learn managerial. The questionnaire is great. I think that's a good idea. But do we select a proportion of those that are leaving and do an excellent interview, as it were, to make sure that we are acutely aware of the reasons and what we can do better ourselves managerially next time? That's the first question.
Thank you. I can see that I've got Fiona indicating as well to come in.
So thank you, Chair. Just to go back onto the point with the secondary employment. One of the things that we do also check is the conflict of timings for the work that they undertake, to make sure that they're perhaps not working in the other employment while they should be working for the council, so they don't have that conflict. And to really also say that we've got a sickness absence audit coming up next year, which we're then anticipating to use the data from the secondary employment to have a look to see whether there's people who have secondary employment that are taking more sickness leave. So they may be taking additional sickness from the council while working the second employment. And it's these sort of checks, I think, that's going to add more value to it. So as well as this particular audit on the process side of it, it's really bringing in other sort of value elements where it could be impacting on employment at the council.
Thank you very much for that, Fiona.
So just to really say that there's a number of audits that we are looking to undertake, so that we're not looking at the sort of bog standard process, but it really is looking at where the added value is as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just to come back to Councillor Harris's point in terms of staff being interviewed, I don't know whether we actually interview key staff at the moment, but I will have that conversation with our people and performance manager, and I will email around to the committee to let you know the results of that, and obviously raise that suggestion that you feel that key staff should be interviewed to get that feedback.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for that answer, Hayley. My next question is on a very simple one, and it's a one-liner really. The fraud and corruption, where you've got the one urgent action that's not done yet. There is a portfolio holder in charge of that. Are they kept fully appraised of the situation, and are they updated? Because I would guess that being the portfolio holders at the cold face, as it were, with yourself, they will be kept appraised. I hope they would be.
Yes, they are. So they're aware of what's going on with the fraud and corruption audit.
Thanks very much. Are there any further questions on this? If not, then I think we've reviewed and commented on the various issues, and I recommend those for approval. Agreed. Thank you very much. We now move on to the internal audit plan for the next municipal year. Hayley, yours again.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I presented for you a proposed plan for the 23-24 audit programme. What we do is have a 5-year rolling programme for internal audit. So when we appoint our contractors, we set a 5-year plan with them in terms of delivering the audits for us. However, we are aware that audits change, the organisation changes over time. So where we start off with 5 years ago, or in this case, 3 years ago, thinking that we would have certain processes in place, they may change. So what we do is we do an annual update and say whether we think those audits that we had identified at the beginning are still appropriate to be carried out in the coming financial year, or whether there's any changes. For the 23-24 year, we've set out the audit programme very, very similar to how it was anticipated when the contract started. However, what we are doing is it'll be reviewed in year to reflect the new organisational structure, because as you know, we are changing our management structure within the organisation. We are looking to do things differently with our management and giving more responsibility to service leads. And what we want to do is to reflect the internal audit programme to provide us with that reassurance that those changes that we are making are appropriate and that our systems of control are still working as we want them to. But for the time being, what we need to do is start the year because we don't have that new structure yet. So our programme is set out for you. It covers some areas that are important in terms of providing assurance for our statement of accounts. So we have our annual audits that we have to do. So for things like Leisure World, because of the amount of income that goes through there, our joint committees, so parking and museums, and our key financial systems. We also have some joint audits with Colchester Borough Homes, and we have some audits that we undertake on behalf of CCHL. Now, Colchester Borough Homes has its own internal audit programme. It is delivered by TIER as well. It's a separate contract to the council's contract, but it does provide that continuity in terms of the auditors understanding the processes that are used. In terms of CCHL, we allocate some of the council's audit days for CCHL to be able to decide what they want to use them on. We keep them separate because we are three separate entities, and each organisation has to have the ability to have a conversation with their internal auditors that is privileged to them. So, for example, if CCHL felt that there was a problem in one of their particular services, they would want to be able to have that audit carried out without reporting it to the council first, because they need to be able to have that support from the auditors to be able to make those improvements before that report comes through to ourselves. Now, in terms of CCHL, the audits do get reported to us eventually, but it goes through their board first, and then they have the opportunity to tell us what they've done in response to the audit. So it's not that we don't ever see it, it's the fact that they have the opportunity to make the changes they need to before it gets reported here. And as for Colchester Borough Homes, they provide us with their annual governance statement each year and their governance review. They are under no obligation to provide us with any details of their internal audit programme because they are a separate company to us. And it's whether you have any questions on the programme that's proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Smithson.
First, Chair, can I just disclose a non-pecuniary interest as a board member of CBH and am responsible for helping to set that audit plan. I thought I probably ought to cover that first. I have 3 points I'd like to make about the strategic plan, if I may. The first is it would be really helpful to have an indication somewhere on here if any of these audits are statutory and or mandatory. They're not called out. I know we've got a column for some optional ones. If any are statutory or mandatory, can we bold them or something so we just see which ones have to be undertaken? The second point I wanted to make was around the number of audits. I count 20, which means that's an average of 15 days to complete every audit, not including any time at the bottom for the management and the annual planning and all that sort of stuff. So just questioning whether 15 days is long enough to actually complete the audits, and would we be better off reducing the number slightly, changing the program to say 6 years rolling or something like that, so that we actually cover things in a little more detail. And then the last point I wanted to make, and I will admit I've pre-warned Hayley that I would be making this point. There are 4 finance audits on the schedule plus other finance related audits. And I'm just questioning whether we're going to be able to complete those next year in the absence of a permanent Section 151 officer. As we've already highlighted key person dependency as a theme this evening, is that going to be an issue for us going forward?
Thank you very much. Like Hayley to answer, but I'd also like the internal auditors to answer on your question on timing, to give their views as to whether they think the timescales are appropriate.
Absolutely. In terms of the first one about making the statutory ones stand out, yes, absolutely. I'll make sure that that's done for you in future going forwards. And I tend to do that when I do the internal report to our management team, so I do apologise. With regards to the number of days, I know Fiona will have a view on this. Our view is we work very closely with TIA in terms of looking at the audits and how long they need. Whilst there is an average of 15 days per audit, some will be a lot more, some will be a lot less. And what we do is for the annual audits, we do them more in depth every other year. So if it's come out as a reasonable or substantial assurance on a regular basis, we don't do the same in-depth audit every year. We do a light touch in between and then we do a fuller one. So that gives us more days back to spend on some of the other audits, but I'm sure Fiona will go into a bit more detail about that. And in terms of the interim section 151, and I appreciate that is a concern, we have been in that position previously. So when Paul Cook was originally appointed a few years ago now, he came in as an interim officer and wasn't made permanent for at least a year. So we operated with an interim section 151, which is what we will be doing again going forwards. And we are able to do that in terms of the audits that are carried out, primarily because the whole of the finance system doesn't rely on that one person. Whilst they are the senior finance person and they have that position, actually the finance team and the systems are set up so we don't have to operate with that person being there the whole time. We do have to highlight in our annual governance statement about our section 151 officer. We have to make a statement about them and we have to highlight that they are an interim. But it is a situation that we have been in before. It doesn't have a huge impact on our auditing programme because we're looking at the processes and systems in place. What we will be doing is obviously working directly with the interim when they arrive to ensure that any concerns that they highlight as an interim, because obviously an interim has a very different view sometimes than somebody who works in the organisation. Any issues or concerns that they have, we pick those up as part of the audit.
Thank you very much. Mr. Weaves has also indicated want to join us on the section of 151.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I thought I just should give you some reassurance. You'll remember that on the 23rd of March, we'll be having a special council meeting in relation to the Tendring Colchester Borders DPD, but we'll also be having a second special council meeting on that night, and that will be for full council to ratify the appointment of the interim section 151 officer. So just to give you a assurance that we will have one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now invite the internal auditors to comment on the timescales, please?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, to reiterate what has already been said, in terms of the annual plan and the number of days, we do look to allocate the number of days that we feel is most appropriate to undertake the audit. And that's looking at really the key risk areas within those audits rather than every single control within them. And within the financial systems, as Hayley mentioned, that that is rotated on the aspects that we will deep dive into. In terms of moving to more days, which would undertake a more in-depth audit of particular areas, it is something that some of our councils are looking to do, while others are looking to take the similar approach that we do here. I think with the move to the new management structure, this would open up the opportunity to do, I think, deeper dives in particular areas under a new structure. So it's definitely something that we would consider, but the number of days we have put in at the moment really does reflect the work that we feel that is needed and the number of days that are needed for each particular audit area.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that, you know, I share some of the concerns and the remarks that have been made by Councillor Smithson. I was looking at paragraph 6.3 and the number of days that have been allocated to CCHL, and being aware as we are of the governance reorganization that is taking place with CCHL, I'm just wondering whether the 18 days that are referred to there could be expanded if deemed necessary.
Thank you. Hayley.
Absolutely, and I totally understand your concerns, Councillor Pearson, about CCHL. What we have tried to do in the programme is include some of those CCHL services, such as helpline and events, within our audit programme, so they don't have to use up their days. We will be working very closely with the interim managing director, and you'll be receiving a report later on this month that gives a lot more detail about that. If we require further internal audit days, then we will be providing those. What we will probably do is purchase those extra to the programme that we have, because obviously I don't want to impact on the council's programme, but if it's felt that further internal audit work is required, then we will resource that. What I would say is internal audit looks back over transactions as opposed to primarily looking forwards. So a lot of the work that we're going to undertake with CCHL is about resetting and setting a new process going forwards. So it might be that the internal audit work takes place further down the line. It's not something that we would probably look to do straight away, because we're aware of some of those issues that have already been highlighted, and it probably wouldn't be worth using our internal audit days to review those again, but going forwards in the future to provide us with the reassurance that the changes that we're making are appropriate, I think would be worthwhile.
Thank you very much. I think we note the commitment that if additional audit work is required, the resources will be found for it. Councillor Sunnets.
Yes, when 3 points. First on CCHL, following up on Councillor Pearson. The days you allocate to CCHL, will they be looking at the statutory, what is statutorily on the CCHL balance sheet, or what they're managing, which is on our balance sheet? And I think that's quite an important question, because one of the, it's a bit of a muddle. What we think they're managing is actually on their balance sheet. The really big action that they're managing is largely on our balance sheet. And so CCHL itself shouldn't absorb many days. It's an events business, and it's a helpline, and there's one or two other, and it's a lot of intercompany stuff. And they've just had a hell of a big effort from ethical consulting, I think, and another one I think is on the way from SIPFA. I think where we need to be looking is on our own balance sheet as advised by CCHL. That's interesting. The second point I wanted to make is that in these days where we're having to cut our costs, is there any element of cost auditing? I haven't heard any reference to that. I'm very used to internal auditors looking around for waste, and we've probably got an instinct of where there might be waste in the organisation, and it might be quite useful. I wouldn't do it in the public meeting, but it might be quite useful to ask that that's looked at. And the third thing is you're talking about yourself being a support for the external auditors, and they will your activities will be a great comfort to them. Are we sure that we've done everything we possibly can and left them with no excuse to finger point back at ourselves internally? Have we done everything they've asked us to do and asked all their questions? Because of course we've got a huge problem with the external audit.
Thank you. Again, I think it's quite right that we should also ask the internal auditors to answer that question.
Absolutely. In terms of the CCHL balance sheet, you're quite right. Some of the big ticket expenditure items come through the council, and they are included in our auditing programme. In terms of the days that CCHL have, they can use those on more of their management review. For example, one of the ones they've used previously is to look at a whistleblowing issue that was raised within their service area. But I think you're right, the financial expenditure comes through us, and that's part of our external auditing programme as well. With the cost auditing, in terms of all the audits that are carried out, our auditors do look at any wastage or cost implications. And if there are issues or concerns, they'll raise those as part of the report. And I think it's always difficult to highlight particular areas in terms of finding those savings. So unless we know where to look, sometimes it's hard to find them. But obviously, if people do have concerns or you want to have an area of review, then please do let me know. And in terms of that relationship with external audit, with the relationship with external audit, we do work closely with them as far as we can. Obviously, the current external audit has been difficult in terms of the delivery, but I know our internal auditors meet with them as much as they can do to look to see what will provide reassurance. Now, they can't rely totally on internal audit, so they can't necessarily direct us to look at certain things, but if we understand their program, we can deliver a program that supports them. And I've already started the ball rolling because we will have new auditors as from the 1st of April. I've already got the contact details for them, and I'm setting up a meeting between the internal auditors and the external auditors to discuss their audit program going forwards. And I'll let Fiona answer as well.
Yeah, no, thank you. In terms of, absolutely, so we will meet with the external auditors. One of the things that we generally do, we know roughly what they will deem as key controls. So we would start to make sure that we are covering what they would deem as key controls. We also use data analytics wherever we can. So if we can, if the systems provide the right data, that we can then do full population testing, which would then far exceed their expectations and demands on us. And if not, we are always then looking at sample sizes and to make sure, as I say, the risk areas and key controls are being covered, so that there is no comeback later on to where they then couldn't place reliance on our work. In terms of our reports and anything that they need to support that, we're more than happy to provide that, and we do discuss that with them in advance, and also then around year end as well, just to make sure there is everything that they would expect is covered by us.
Thank you very much. Councillor Smithson.
If I could just ask Fiona a quick question. Fiona, you mentioned data analytics. Which software package are we using for that?
We use a package called ACL. I don't know if you've come across that, yeah. So with some of the basic data analytics, we do then use spreadsheets where we need to use our ACL software, which we do quite regularly for more in-depth data analytics work in each of our teams. So within our team, we have a data analytics expert who uses the ACL software for us and then undertakes that part of the work on each of the audits.
Sorry, just one follow-up on that. In relation to the fraud audit you're carrying out, have you done a Benford analysis on the financials?
No, we haven't.
Okay, would you mind doing one, please?
Yeah, absolutely. We can start to look into that.
Thank you very much. I've got a couple of observations. The first one is I must say I'm very impressed with the layout of the reports. It's been very clear and easy to see this. And for someone who's had a break for a few years from internal audit reports, I can see considerable improvement. So I would like to congratulate you all on that and in the way in which you clearly set out what's been done. I think the presentation is very good. And the second one is I see that there is a safeguarding audit due on looking at page 51. I do hope that that can pick up some of the points that were raised earlier on to ensure that all councillors and staff are fully aware of it when we're doing that next year. I hope that will be able to be incorporated.
Definitely, Councillor Smith. We'll make sure that that's in the brief for the audit.
Thank you very much indeed. There's no other points on that one. I can ask that we note those various points. We've considered the audit plans. Thank you very much, councillors. And we'll now move on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the interim review of the annual governance statement 2021-2022. Hayley.
You're going to get really fed with me by the end of the evening, aren't you? So, you may recall back in June, you received a report entitled the Annual Governance Statement. We do an annual review of our governance controls, looking back over the previous financial year and doing a self-assessment of where we feel that there may be some improvements required. As part of that process, we produce an action plan highlighting those areas where we feel that we could improve those controls. And we set out how we're going to do that and who's responsible for it. Now, as part of the process, I bring you an interim report halfway through the year to say how we're getting on and where we are with those. So I've set out on page 57 for you, the Appendix 1, which is the 3 items that were identified on the annual governance statement this year and where we are with them. So there were 3 items: procurement, the external audit implications, and company governance. Now, obviously, the external audit implications is one that we have very little control over in terms of the delivery of the external audit programme. You're fully aware of the issues that we have trying to get that programme resolved, and also the fact that it's not specific to Colchester. It's across the board. Quite a few of the external audit providers are having similar problems, and delivery has been difficult. And I know that our Chief Finance Officer has been keeping you updated with that. In terms of procurement, I haven't had a full assessment back from the service yet. I've been assured that those items are being completed. However, what I'm going to do is ask the internal auditors to do a follow-up on that for me and to report back to yourselves the results of that audit. The final item, company governance, obviously we've touched on it already this evening in terms of the reports that have been carried out, the external reports on CCHL. We've had the 2, the ethical consulting one and SIPFA. Obviously, the ethical consulting one, you've had a preliminary report already. SIPFA, you're due to receive that report later on this month with a completed action plan, setting out how we're going to deliver some of those changes going forward. So I don't propose to go into too much detail about that one now, because I think that's more appropriate for the meeting later on this month. So it's whether you have any questions on those 3 items. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And at this point, I'd also like to welcome the Magdalen Wood Women's Institute, who are doing a tour of the town hall and requested to see the council in action. So, so they've chosen a particularly exciting item, but I would ask all members to avoid using jargon and abbreviations so that we at least have a chance of following what was being said. Councillor Sykes.
Yes, the audit, the external audit comes up here. Can we not be, we're 2 years behind now, can we not be more proactive? And could we not invite KPMG in to quote for, and I know we have to do this through the central government body, but I think we could make it happen. Can we not ask them to quote for doing the catch-up work on the 2 years that haven't been done? And then say to BDO that if it comes to more than their fee, that they are liable for that. I think that might put some pressure on the system. At the moment, we seem to be just here, sitting here, wringing our hands and becoming more and more like the EU with and if we leave it any longer, it's going to be an impossible task to catch up.
Thank you. I should update some members of the panel that Councillor Harris, Councillor Wood and myself had a meeting today when we were filling out a review of what we thought of the failure of the external auditors to produce the 2020-21 accounts. I can say that we were very unflattering. The fact that these auditors have had 3 separate audit managers in the past year has obviously considerably delayed this. Every new manager coming in needs to pick up where the other one left off, and it's been a complete disaster. We know that there are many, many other councils in the same position. I think the last we heard, over 80 councils were still waiting for this. And unfortunately, the firm that we're using, who I will name and shame, BDO, have been the worst performing of all the ones. So we have been certainly making our views very clear, and today's recommendations, and it's a shame, Councillor, you weren't able to join us at that one, because I'm sure you had valuable input. We've been making our views very clear, and we've asked for their professional body to look at their work, because it seems to me unacceptable. We're talking about huge sums of public money, not just in this authority, but across the country, that are not being audited properly. And whilst I have no reason at all to believe there is anything wrong with our accounts, or indeed any of the other councils, the public should be having that assurance. So I'd just like to let everyone on this panel know what we've been doing, because we've certainly not been sitting back and twiddling our thumbs on it. Councillor.
Sorry, the approach I'm suggesting is a little different from that, because we can rant and rave at people who are not present. And I used to be part of the external auditing profession myself for many years, and we haven't heard their point of view. Our accounts are complicated, and I think we need to really work at solving the problem. We can't solve the problem of all the other councils, but I can see a way forward to trying to solve our problem, and constructively. And that's really my question is, can we please take that slightly more commercial, practical approach? As I say, we're not going to get anywhere by expressing fury, which I share incidentally. We need a solution.
Indeed we do, but so do another 80 councils as well. Hayley.
The honest answer is I don't know the answer to that question, but I will certainly make some inquiries. I will talk to Paul Cook whilst he's still here to have that conversation, and I will come back to you, Councillor Sunnox, and let you know.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a little bit about the procurement. Again, we had a deadline for due date 31st December, and it hasn't been fully met. This one, there is no one to blame but ourselves. Could we have some more information as to why it wasn't completed in time, please?
I can't give you that information right now because I don't have the response from the service area, but I will follow that up and I'll include that in my email around to the committee in terms of where we are with procurement, to give you that reassurance of the exact position and any reasons why the recommendations haven't been implemented at this stage.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pearson, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to say it's such a shame that you've come into this most exciting of meetings to see how we operate. While we look at audits, the driest thing you're ever going to see us discuss, but they are essential. They are important to what we do. I wanted to pick up on the point that you just made, Chair, because I was slightly concerned when I saw that still hadn't been done. And as much as I love the Hayley McGrath show once a year, I have to say, I think that's one that I would like an assurance that we have a report back at our final meeting of the municipal year on the 30th of this month, is it? Whatever it is, just to ensure that has actually happened.
I think we certainly should have that updated because it's quite there. But Councillor Pearson, you know as well as I do, there are a great number of people with audit qualifications around this table who have find nothing more enjoyable than looking at large numbers of figures and what have you. And that's probably why they were given these particular responsibilities to be on this particular panel. Yes. But again, I thank you and welcome your contributions there. Have we any further comments on this item? In which case, Hayley, having given you a couple of extra bits of work to do there, can I ask that we again approve them? Thank you very much. Right, we're now rapidly approaching 7:30 and we still have several more items of business on the agenda. So I'm going to propose that we have an adjournment for 15 minutes, then we come back and deal with the remaining items on the risk management agenda. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll resume with item 10. The Risk Management Progress Report. Hayley, you again, I believe.
It is, thank you, Chair. And I've been ably joined by the leader of the council as well, who is very supportive of our risk management process, I have to say. So it's the interim progress report for you in terms of looking at our risk register. So it's reported to you twice a year. You have a full in-depth review around about July time, and then we bring you the 6-monthly interim report. So this one covers the period from the 1st of April to the 30th of September. Again, it's been delayed being reported to you for various changes that have been made to the Governance and Audit Committee programme. But what I have done is given you the most up-to-date risk register that has been agreed by senior management team. So in terms of the key risks as we see them at the moment, it's partners are a big concern is probably one way of describing it, but obviously a risk in terms of decision making at the moment in our current financial climate. The impact that our partners make does have a huge impact on our delivery of services. Our funding obviously remains an issue. Cyber security and potential attacks. We've recently had a cyber attack on the organisation. It was stopped by our ICT department, but it was an email that had come in from our partner organisations to a member of staff. Staff wellbeing, and obviously the impacts of the cost of living crisis, which is not getting any easier. So I've also set out for you just a brief outline of some of the work undertaken during the period. So as well as the normal day job and looking at the risk registers and supporting risk management within the organisation. We started to look at the governance arrangements for the council. So as I mentioned in the previous report, the senior management structure has changed and work is progressing on the transformation programme with the lower level down of the structure in the organisation. So I've been working with our now senior board, looking at risk and governance in general, and actually they are very keen to ensure that the governance programme is suitable for the new structure going forwards, and they want to make sure that actually they understand their responsibilities as a board in terms of governance for the organisation, as well as giving some of that ability for staff who previously may not have been able to make some key decisions to have a bit more autonomy and decision making in how we do that safely, and about the reporting to the board to ensure that they've got the right information to be able to make the decisions. So I myself and our health and safety officer at the time undertook a spec of waste services as part of operational risk. So we actually walked into our waste services depot and pretended to be from the health and safety executive and said that we'd had a significant incident where we had a fatality with one of the dust carts, and we actually asked for all their records and we actually treated it like an HSE investigation, which was an interesting process. And actually it was quite difficult, is probably the wrong word, but it was quite interesting for the staff involved because we actually approached it as if we were the HSE. We wanted the documentation there and then. We wanted them to justify why they didn't have things, etc. And actually it was a really good way of them understanding what their responsibilities are if we do have such an incident in the future. And whilst that's health and safety related, it does tie in with our operational risk management processes. Also been looking at the Northern Gateway development and the insurance arrangements for the Northern Gateway development. As you may be aware, we've got a very large development going on, a big build up at the Northern Gateway, including the cinema, etc. And actually that's quite a big insurance programme on its own. So we've been working with our friends in Amphora to look at what those requirements are, and also with the developers and the managing agents going forward about liability and who's responsible for what once those units are let, and how we're going to manage that insurance risk going forwards. We had an internal audit of the risk management function undertaken in September 22, and we had 4 recommendations as a result of the audit. We had a reasonable assurance, which I always find is good. No, it's good. It's not the best, but actually it just means that there are some areas we need to improve on. All the recommendations that were outlined have been agreed, and we've implemented them as part of the review of the governance processes. So they included the enforcing of the project risk processes, which is a different service area. They manage your project risks, looking at the operational risk process. So whilst I report to you the strategic risks, our operational risks are managed by the services, and obviously as a result of the reorganisation that we're going through, we need to review how that operational process looks and how it's reported. And following on from the last report to this panel in July, our risk management strategy has been agreed by Cabinet and full council without amendment, and the policy framework's been updated accordingly. So set out at Appendix B for you, page 64, is the current strategic risk register. It is reviewed by our senior management team, our board, and it was reviewed back in December, and there was a couple of changes made to 2 risks. Risk ST4, which is the ongoing and recovery impacts of COVID-19. So they were reduced down, and the reason for reducing down the COVID-19 pandemic risk is because actually so many lessons were learned during the pandemic that even if we have a new wave or a new pandemic, our processes for being able to meet those issues and concerns would be far better. We would be in a better position. And actually now it should be treated as business as usual. So we should be reducing that risk down. It's not imminent at this point in time. Risk CO3 financial equality. It's felt that the changes implemented in the customer team to focus on financial and employment support for customers has prevented the need for prevention crisis in many cases. However, it is recognised there is still significant increases in the cost of crisis and a need for our services, and therefore the impact has been increased from a 3 to a 4 to raise that risk higher. And it's whether there's any questions on the other risks that we have on the register.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, it was going to be me. So a couple of things. CO3, appreciate that the impact of the initial score has increased. I'm still trying to see how the residual score has gone up in both probability and impact. So it's actually resulted in a doubling of the residual impacts, the residual score. So if you could explain that first, please.
Yeah, in terms of the probability doesn't decrease from the initial score with the mitigation that we've put in place, because the risks are still there. And we felt that it was still such a level that whatever we put in, the probability won't change. The impact is the one that is not as high without the mitigation. So we put the mitigation in, it reduces the impact down, but I don't think we can get away from the probability. And it is always difficult with assessing risk, as you well know. It's about personal perception. So talking to the board and their perceptions of risk and what they feel is relevant at this point in time. But they wanted to highlight, I think, the fact that financial inequality is something that is of concern to them across our communities. And they didn't want that to be forgotten, for want of a better description.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one I just wanted to bring up is EF1, the capital program. We started at a relatively good score, call it good. I'm just challenging whether 6 is right for the residual score, given that we've literally suspended the entire capital program and the risk is that the council is unable to deliver the priority as set out in the strategic plan. So I am not convinced that the probability should be as low as 3. I think the probability is almost certainly at the maximum at the moment.
And I take those comments on board. The last review was in December, and obviously we're now in March. So some of those issues that have arisen in the new year probably aren't reflected in the register. So I'll raise that as an issue when I take it back to the board next time round.
Thank you. I'd invite the leader of the council if he'd like to say something on the review of the capital programme and how that's progressing as well.
In terms of capital in particular?
In terms of the risk register, so that we can.
Yeah. Well, what we see here reflects my judgment. That's, I think I will stay with that. As you've said, Hayley, and it's how I've always, reason I sound enough to sort of say, oh, this is quite nice. But any risk register is only the beginning of a conversation, and its value lies in ensuring you have it and that you frame it and you challenge and test yourself against what you know, what you think might be happening. And it's an invitation to a conversation. It does not take away from individual judgment, does not take away from the judgment of the leader of the council or the cabinet as a whole. We have to bear responsibility for, as we all do, for any walk of life, true here, for the outcomes. So every time I look at a risk register, like this again tonight, I start to find myself concerned about what any one of those boxes might mean, because of the knowledge or insight that you have and I have about the imponderables and the way they mesh together. So if I go to capital in particular, I am anxious to have the next update on where we are on the internal work around this, because actually this, unlike some risks which become real and then you've got something very tangible, capital is always real. This is work in train, money's committed, contracts to be extended or reworked, projects to be delivered or not. So I want to say a couple of words about that, if I might. So all of these things matter. They're a rich picture. They inform discussions that you around this table are well aware of. But capital remains a particular concern for me because of it is so specific. I do have some assurance to give though, which is that every conversation I have with project teams who are working at the latest rounds, because capital is still happening, projects are still happening, and we are good at some of this. We are good at bidding, and we're determined, this council is determined to be good at delivery. That's really challenging. So I'm having the same conversations as I've had in this place before, when we recognised in this last year that capital was challenged by circumstances, by past decision making and by reporting systems of which we've all presided to some degree. So levelling up funds and town deal funds, I went through them today. I've said the same sorts of things as, I'm going to use the word commercial, this is just to get William's attention. The same kind of approach has to be taken here about really knowing your onions, making sure you pin down your projects, your program, your cost, your finance, knowing what your contingency is, all that kind of stuff. And good, we have some really capable people. They get it, they're on it. But it would be absolutely wrong. I'm just going to say this one illustration of risk to suggest anything other than, it's a bit of a rocky road yet. Some really significant parts of the overall capital programme being given a really good scrub, not for here on our line turnstone, but else with CCHL is going through a related review. So if you wanted to look at this from the outside, you're looking at what's going on in the family of organisations. I take real assurance that really good people have for some months been looking at the things that matter, and that really good people, the best of our officers with the best of counties, are all over the latest successes, because in the world we're in, there's no block grant anymore. That's gone forever. You have to bid and win and deliver. First 2 ticked, and we're on the road to the 3rd, but we're going to have to continue to pay attention here at cabinet and away from here to ensure that we maximise the prospects.
Thank you, Leader. I think that's reassuring to hear that progress is being made. I'm sure we'd all want to see the review of the capital programme, and I think your concerns, Councillor Smithson, would be hopefully allayed when we have a capital programme which we are then confident that we have the resource to achieve. You'd like to come back, I think.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leader. A thought just occurred to me while you were talking about capital. Do we know if, and I don't expect we have an answer tonight, do we know if any of our capital project contracts have non-performance penalties in them? So if we're not proceeding with capital projects, are we liable to penalties from third-party contractors for not going forward at the pace we were supposed to when the contract was signed? And I say I don't expect we'll have an answer tonight. Thank you.
Well, I mean, no, we're not in that position. I have to sort of say that the way I look at the capital programme, that pause in decision making, got one particular project in mind in North Colchester, which is of interest to many of us. But in the main, this has been about not changing the path of projects that are underway, but ensuring that those projects are effectively managed and that we understand what the risks and issues might be around it. Now, on a technical aside, many years ago, liquidated damages, do you want to talk about things like that? You know, you can price into anything, but there's always a price. So all I would sort of say is we're not in a position anything other than what I would think to be appropriate contracting, but we'll just run a final check between ourselves away from here. If there's anything we should come back and tell you, we will.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sutton.
Yes, picking up on the review of the capital programme. We need, the question I would ask is, are we going to see decent appraisals for all the major capital items as part of that review of the capital programme? And if they can't be made public for various reasons, can we have a look at the appraisals that I have looked at have been quite well, some items that are worth scrutiny on them. I think I put it no more strongly than that. So I don't regard the appraisals I've seen in the public sector as particularly strong, and we are stepping into property development in the Northern Gateway, and I see very significant risks there for the council that we're not going to change it, but just as Councillor King says, we've got to understand and manage them. But I really think that, and I was very pleased to hear you say that you're looking at the insurance for the development there, but I'd hope that your risk mandate would be a lot wider and a lot more commercial than that. Development is the riskiest thing you can do, honestly, and you've only got to put your foot wrong once and you blow your head off. And we should, I see that as the risk, probably the riskiest area of our operation. Also see big risk in the garden community, where we are taking the risk. Other people are deciding, but if they don't deliver, it's Colchester that's suffering the risk. If they don't deliver the link road, it's us that, it's our road will be congested, and our residents will be complaining and saying, why the hell did you do that? And if they don't deliver the health facilities, it'll be, our people who will be complaining they can't get a GP appointment, and so on and so forth. It goes all the way through. There's £340 million worth of contributions we're expecting from those people. And, it seems a very significant risk that we're not going to get those. So I'd love to see this risk register more sort of project focused and less generic. And then we can really get stuck into some of these issues.
What you're referring to is our project risk management process, and that is separate and it's reported separately to our strategic risks. So that goes through a whole different reporting programme. What I will do is have a look and see what extracts I can deliver as part of our risk reporting going forwards to this committee, in terms of giving you some of that reassurance about the project risk management. Because obviously, as I say, it has its own boards. For example, garden communities is reported separately. It goes through its own committee. So it has a definite different risk register to strategic, and it's keeping those separate, but the project management process is very detailed. And I don't know if you've ever seen that before, or had any interaction with our project teams in terms of delivery of those project data. Yeah, so maybe we'll have a look at bringing that to a future meeting so you can see it, because that will probably give you the information that you're looking for that wouldn't be contained within the strategic risk register to that level.
Shouldn't this committee be seeing some of these specific risks, or do we have to survive on generic risks? And for example, on the Garden Community Project, is the board you're referring to there the joint committee? Because I see Colchester's risks as very, very different and much more serious than the risks that the other councils are bearing. And I think there's a systemic risk that we get dumped on by that, which we've got to do everything we can to manage.
Yeah, and within our strategic risk register, it wouldn't be specific in terms of facts and figures that you're looking for. It's more about the systemic risks to Colchester being involved in those projects. So it wouldn't give you the detail about spend specifically or contract costs. It would be more high level in the strategic risk register. But what I'll do is I'll work with the leader to look at see how we can give you some of that information as part from the project risk process to give you that reassurance going forwards.
Thank you. I mean, I'm conscious we are straying a little bit from the agenda for this meeting, where we are looking at the strategic risks rather than those joint bodies. So
once more, this project risk is a different system that we're not seeing here that's dealing with project risk. And who does look at that project risk? Where does that get scrutinized?
I don't know at this point in time. It was the boards previously, so it would go through the project reporting boards, but the leader probably has more detail on it than I do.
I have an acknowledgement which I've given to individuals, which is that there is a gap at the moment. We did have a public committee which ensured that there was an open scrutiny and discussion around what was called then the revolving investment fund, which in itself was an interesting term because I didn't see much revolve really. But no doubt it worked once upon a time. I'm not sure it worked well when I saw it, but the aim was appropriate, which was an open discussion in which it was a cabinet subset. Officers understand that we have to, when we've gone through this, there's no point doing it beforehand, before completing the refresh and scrub that's been we are aware is underway. When we've got ourselves straight and through that, we have to go back to that some form of challenge process through that. And I expect it to come through. It has done before. To come through, if not governance and audit, then scrutiny. We have to go back to that normal process. Because at any one moment, just remind us, any one thing can be pulled out and looked at. And I'll say the officers do a fab job on this. And Hayley's shown that tonight. There's a real awareness, and so we have to have a context. There is awareness and knowledge of the business of the day, but it has to have a cycle of refresh, which is happening now. Then there has to be a regular cycle of challenge and an open discussion about it. These aren't secrets. Every project's declared, everything's known, but I think bringing it together in a composite way will be really helpful. So that's certainly on my agenda to go and do that.
thank you. I think we will look forward to receiving that with interest, and whether it goes through this panel or whether it goes through scrutiny, I think there could be a fairly good debate over it, but it certainly should be going through one or other of them to allow that oversight. And I appreciate it might even be something, given that it's a joint committee, that we could usefully do with our neighbours as well, because if it's a concern to us, it's also a concern to tendering and to Essex County Council, perhaps to a slightly lesser degree in some cases, but they too have interests in those matters. Yes, Leader.
Can I just make a distinction? It's a really important one. So we have the joint committee, and I understand, and William, you and I had this conversation quite a few times about the different views on. This is our joint committee, We are committed to it as a council. As a council, we have agreed to take this route. It's in our local plans. We have to make the joint committee work. Those who look at these arrangements tell me, and it makes sense to me, because I've never found anything other than cooperation to be the best route. This is the best way ahead. So we have to use that. That means we already have. We may have to look and see, can we do that yet better? But we do have that joint vessel. We take it in terms of chair, I or another, maybe chairing it next year, assuming that we don't destroy it next week. So we don't need to replicate that, in my view. I see no advantage in that at all. It's not to say that we can't have a side conversation about risks and issues, but I wouldn't want to go and duplicate what we've already got. We've got quite robust processes here which are aimed at trying to make sure that joint committee is served well, independently, through local authorities, with whom there's a real set of trustful relationships, in my view, served by the three sets of officers of three local authorities, and then heaven knows who else, Homes England and government ministers even occasionally, right? So the whole system serves us and culture that way, but it doesn't stop the committees saying we want to have a look, Chair, at any one particular issue, but I would really recommend we make it no more than that. We'll have a sidebar conversation to see if there's anything in the grand strategic sense that we're missing, because it may be fair to acknowledge that we should give more or less prominence to subjects such as this. But the other part of the conversation we had earlier, Chair, was about capital programs as a whole, and that I hope we're all clear on. Good process applies that will go through the committees at the right stage. Thank you.
I don't want to have a run through of the debates next week. Councillor Pearson, then I'll come back to you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to come back and say, until 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago it was now, most of the financial reports that we see coming through this committee went through scrutiny. Yeah. And the decision was taken in consultation between me as chair of the committee and the chair of the scrutiny committee at the time, that much of that would come to governance and audit because of the workloads that were on scrutiny. So I see no reason why those reports shouldn't continue to come to this committee as they have done this year, and anything that comes from the garden community in the future perhaps ought to come via this committee at least once a year to have an overview and a look-see. And I would suggest that that's the way forward, Chair.
Thank you. Well, given that we have a scrutiny meeting tomorrow night and the night after, I can certainly see some sympathy with that, but that will be a matter for between the chairs of them. Councillor.
Yes, if I can endorse what Councillor Pearson says, it would be silly to have this committee looking at the generic risk register and then another committee looking at the project risk. I can see sense in it coming here. Hope that the message go back very clearly that the vacuum in scrutiny of the project risks should be corrected. Just on the garden community, just one word. Our risks are different. Our existing risk registers as number one risk the actions of third party or partner organisations, and I think that's how we should think of it. We should think of it that we should look. We do have to represent our residents on this thing. Yes, we should be cooperative, but we have to stand our corner. We have to impress on our partners in that we are specially at risk from the garden community. So huge. We already have more development than we have infrastructure, and this is going to be in triplicate, and without us having the planning control that we have of other places. So I think it ought to be fitted in with that, not in a nasty way, on an unpartnerly way, but it should be. And the last thing is the point about appraisals got lost. Can we have confirmation that as part of the capital review, we will have appraisals, we will see financial appraisals for major projects? I just haven't been able to get that. I've been promised appraisals for one little project in my ward, It's a garage project. Haven't been able to get it. I've tried and tried. I've been promised it, but I just haven't been able to get it. We need that sort of disclosure if we as councillors are going to actually see that we're on the right lines with these capital projects.
I'll certainly take that one away for you in
Yeah.
terms of looking at the appraisals. My understanding from the project process is that every project should have a financial appraisal and that it doesn't get approved until there's a project appraisal. So I will make sure and have a conversation and come back to you. If you want to drop me a line separately outside of here and let me know about the project you're concerned about, then I'll obviously follow that up and see what's happened with that for you.
Thank you very much. I think we've concluded on that one. So subject to those items, can we approve the risk register as said? And again, I'm sure our comments will be taken forward. And can I thank also the leader for attending and for giving us the benefit of his thoughts and his commitments on what's going forward. We now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the annual review of business continuity.
You'll be pleased to know it's the last one from me, so you're nearly finished, it's okay. Business continuity is a process that we have within the organisation to ensure that we can continue to provide our services. If an incident occurs and it's difficult, for example, if we wake up one morning and find that one of our major buildings has burnt down or our phone system goes down, something of that nature, something internal to the organisation. It's related very heavily to emergency planning as well, which is our ability to respond to an incident outside within the city. So, for example, it could be a significant issue such as a train crash or major flooding, where we have a responsibility to provide support to the emergency services as a Category 3 responder. But business continuity is important to us to ensure that we can actually deliver services to our residents, even when we are suffering from an interruption. It is not something that has to be reported to committee, so there is no constitutional reason to bring you an annual report. However, we feel it's good practice as part of our risk management framework to keep you updated with our business continuity work and our strategy. Therefore, I bring you an annual report just to give you some information and for ask you to endorse the strategy for 2023. So I've set out for you some of the work that's been undertaken with business continuity. As I say, it's very closely related to emergency planning as well. Obviously, we've coming out of the pandemic, which had a huge impact on providing our services in the face of adversity. And what we're trying to concentrate on at the moment is looking at making sure that our services have robust plans, business continuity plans themselves. So we put together a timetable for each of our service areas, showing where they've got plans, when they've been reported through to our senior management team, and when they've been tested. And we provide regular information to our Chief Operating Officer in terms of the robustness of our processes to give that reassurance that we can provide to continue to provide them. And as from September last year, we've started to test those as well. So we do tabletop exercises looking at different scenarios, a bit like the one that I referred to in the risk management report, where we walked into our waste services area and gave them a scenario and asked them to produce their information. So we do have what's known as the critical service plan. So obviously we can't hope to provide every single service of the council if we have a major incident. So we split them up into our critical services and non-critical. And we talk through with our senior management team in terms of which services are critical. And we set those out in the strategy. So we have plans and they're set out in the appendix in the strategy, showing which ones are key. So there'll be things like our benefit payments, because obviously we need to carry on paying those, making those payments regardless of what's happened to us. We've also, our resilience officers have been putting together an e-learning course for all staff so they can understand their business continuity requirements and what their role is in delivering services. So for example, when we had the pandemic, some of our services that were non-critical, the staff in those services were redeployed to other areas to provide services elsewhere. We've also delivered in-person training to our helpline staff on our business continuity and emergency response procedures to ensure that they understand their role, because it's critical in an out of hours call. Helpline get the first call. They need to understand how they're going to respond to those calls and how they refer them onwards. And one of the things that we have been looking at with the Essex Resilience Forum, which is all of the authorities in Essex, is about the power outages. So they were in the news quite a lot in the run up to Christmas and in January in terms of planned power outages. And we had to understand how we as an organisation would be able to deal with those and what sort of services, support services would need. For example, helpline themselves. If our power was taken down, how would we manage our helpline service? How would those critical calls come into us? So along with our partners in the Resilience Forum, we looked at an Essex-wide plan and a Colchester plan as well of how we respond in those sorts of incidents. So the business continuity strategy is set out for you. We haven't made any particular changes to it. We have updated the critical services and we've set out some of the actions that are required. And it's whether you have any questions.
Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. It was just playing semantics slightly, but the top of page 83, the appendix 1, roles and responsibilities for members. The first column states agreeing the policy and plan determined by officers. I was slightly concerned about I'll read you a dictionary definition of determined: having made a firm decision and being resolved not to change it. I think I would prefer that to be prepared by officers rather than determined by officers. And the third and fourth columns refer to there being a united approach to continuity. Now, there may be circumstances, I can foresee that there might be circumstances where there wouldn't be a united will, but there may well be a significant majority will. And I just think, again, it's just about playing that semantics in those two columns.
Could we go with recommended approach to business continuity? Would that suffice as opposed to determine? We would recommend to you.
I would be far happier with recommended, Chair.
Absolutely fine. I will make the change to make sure that's a recommend to recommend a policy and to agree with. Recommended by officers, not determined by officers, and I totally understand your point. Thank you. It's difficult in terms of that united approach to continuity, and I totally understand that political process in terms of there may not always be a united approach. I would hope that when we're faced with an adversity issue that there is, but we'll look to see if we can find a word that is not quite as determined as united, so that there's a bit more flexible, that allows for some area of disagreement.
I think the point is that there would be a clear strategy that the administration at the time would put forward. Whether everyone agreed with that, probably not. But the fact that there is if the building is on fire, someone needs to be saying, you're going out through that door. Whether it turns out to be the right decision, or whether it should be that door or that door, would have been better, would be left to us. But what's important is that someone's heading out through the door rather than that we're all sitting here arguing as to which door we should go for as the flame leap ever higher. But thank you. I think those points are well made. And I'm also pleased to see that in this draft that the role of members has been put in, because I think I remember an earlier version many years ago where members weren't included at all in the planning. When we do these scenarios, test scenarios, are members ever involved in those? Or sorry, cabinet members, I would guess, would be the appropriate ones.
At this point in time, no, we haven't done any tabletop exercises where we've included members in them. But what we can do is develop that going forwards in terms of the response. So a significant issue will require cabinet response in terms of making statements on behalf of the organisation and making key decisions. So I'll definitely talk to our resilience officer about incorporating that in future testing as we go forwards.
Thank you. I think that might be very useful. Any further items? Now that Councillor Smith has rejoined us.
Sorry,
We're on item 11.
business continuity. I'm hoping the question I'm about to ask hasn't already been asked. What did we learn from COVID-19 in respect of business continuity?
That actually we're very flexible and adaptable, I think, is probably the overall view that I would give in terms of how we responded as an organisation. I think in honesty, there will always be things that we could have done better. Hindsight is perfect science. So when you go back and review something, you could always go, oh, we could have done that, or we could have done that differently. But I think in general, if you look at how we responded in the very first few days, the initial approach, our business continuity was very good. We moved and we adapted very quickly to home working. We adapted very quickly to online meetings, which for the organisation in general, we hadn't even heard of Teams, let alone knew how to use Teams and actually do online meetings. And that was a real test of resilience in terms of, we had a programme in IT of rolling out Teams over 18 months, starting in 2020. We delivered Teams within a few weeks, and we actually had the majority of the organisation and councillors using Teams. It was interesting. There were some teething issues, but actually I think from my personal opinion, it showed the flexibility of the officers that we have in the organisation to adapt. Now, this scenario will be different. And we did learn some things in terms of perhaps some communication. It's always easy to say we could have communicated better. We communicated, I think, as best as we could have done, given the scenarios that we had in front of us. No one is ever perfect, I would say that. But I think we demonstrated a willingness to make sure that we could still provide services to our communities. For example, our refuse collectors were out still collecting refuse when a lot of authorities stopped refuse collection totally. So I think that was a huge indication of how committed we were to make sure our business continuity plans actually provided services to communities. It may not have been the best, and there'll be people who would still challenge that, but I think it demonstrated that we had that willingness to do it. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. None of that comes through in that document. I think you're doing yourself a massive disservice, because I think the organisation responded really well. And I think the organisation has proven that the next time something goes dramatically wrong with the world, we'll probably be okay. And I think we should pat ourselves on the back a little bit and just make sure that some of those things that we have learned come through in that document, and really sort of say, it gives huge reassurance for us to say, actually, next time this goes wrong, we'll be all right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smithson. That's very kind of you to say.
I think that's echoed by the entire committee. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, I think there was a very comprehensive internal report that was published that showed how the authority responded throughout the pandemic. And I think the term I used, or it was in the report, I can't remember now exactly, was fleet of foot. I think and you're quite right, Councillor Smithson. I think sometimes we hide under a bushel our abilities, don't we? So we ought to be willing to yell from the rafters about how well we've done on occasion.
Thank you. That said, I endorse you to, I invite you to endorse the business strategy, continuity strategy for the coming year. You all in favour? And the final item tonight is the review of the work programme. Given that we're at the end of the year, I would like to say that I think we've made significant progress looking at the items that we've covered. It's quite interesting as to just how much we've actually got through in the year, albeit we didn't get the accounts done yet. I'm hopeful that they will be in by the 28th of March, although quite frankly, I'm probably just as hopeful of Palace winning 5-0 against Arsenal at the weekend. But say thank you very much for that. Have we anything further to add on that, Councillor?
We've got the SIP for review coming up on the 28th of March. We got terms of reference. What are they asked? Could you distribute the terms of reference for that review so we know what it's going to be all about?
Mr. Weaver.
Chairman, thank you. That was already circulated to you on the 17th of January report. It was an appendix to the ethical consulting, but we can certainly circulate it again. It will be attached to the report you're going to get on the 28th of March in any event. So yes, so that was a roundabout way of saying yes, you will get it. Sorry, I should have just said yes, shouldn't I?
Thank you very much for that reminder. Councillor.
Yeah, obviously Councillor Scott is subbing, so he wouldn't have seen the first one. Mr. Weavers, you just said the report we will get on the 28th of March. Does that mean that the SIPFA report will not be circulated beforehand? Because I know there are several members of the committee who can't make the 28th.
Chairman, yeah, thank you for the question. The SIPFA report will be appended to the committee report. So yes, you will get it before the meeting.
Within the usual timescales for publishing for council meetings.
I'm taking that the SIPFA report then, I think we've been promised 2 SIPFA reports, one in relation to CCHL and the other one in relation to something to do with the Treasury management. So will that be coming up at the same time?
Chairman, no, not the Treasury management one. The one you're getting on the 28th of March is purely the CCHL one. That one's to follow.
So when will we be getting the one on the Treasury management?
I can't answer that one, I'm afraid. I'll have to find out for you and come back. Sorry.
Thank you very much. In that case, if we are all done, I can draw this meeting to its conclusion. And thank you all very much for your attendance and for your inputs tonight.